let me get to this next topic. Until Wolf come back, there's another topic I want to get to. But why do y'all think that men prefer like other other races of women?
We just had this topic on our podcast.
That's one of y'all topics.
Yeah, we need to hear that from you guys.
Wait, what? Black men prefer
Just men in general.
Do they prefer?
Well, see, with us
races?
it was why is it that black men prefer either white girls or Spanish girls? That was the topic that we.
You think we?
I think that's incorrect.
I think so.
I think
the way that I see
like
it,
what they like how women like what they like.
I prefer her.
No,
Niggas gonna get they gonna get the
I feel like guys really don't care.
Right.
So Spanish men don't do that.
I feel like Spanish men either tend to go with a white girl or a Spanish girl.
No.
All right,
That's what we
not
see.
So Spanish, when I say they love black girls, they do.
Yeah, they do.
And that's a fact.
Spanish men.
I don't see that.
From
Do you
out
guys
here.
see that in Providence? Because we
No,
don't.
well, that's not standard from where we're from.
No,
I think they're ashamed to show it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, Rhode Island.
Yeah,
I don't see that.
I think it's some shaming and part of it. I don't see them publicly doing it, but I do feel like they are very attracted to black women.
Who?
I feel like they should
Spanish
be. Black
guys?
women are
Me
absolutely
too,
beautiful.
me
They're
too.
goddesses.
I believe the same thing.
You're welcome. I mean that.
Mm-hmm. So and black men too. We ain't gonna just big up Spanish men like they just know. Black men love black women too.
So
like, you know
why
what I'm
is it
saying?
that we see that we hear about that a thing black men don't want to date black
Because
women?
it's easier for the media to paint black men as
As
this
the bad guy.
as the
Black
bad guy.
men marry
We get
black
pointed
women.
at. They say
So it's a myth.
who's stealing out here? Black men.
Oh
Who's
my
fucking
God.
out here? Black men.
Oh my
Who's
God.
cheating out here? Black men. It's just everything.
Like,
It's
black
we're the
men marry
fucking
black
postman.
women at an 87% rate, but y'all want to focus so much
I
on
never
the
knew
other
that.
percent.
I
like,
never knew that.
Because y'all probably see one celebrity and y'all see him with a white girl or a Spanish girl, and y'all try to paint that as all black. Most black men in America marry black women. Like, you know
That's
what I'm
a fact.
saying?
That's
Like,
beautiful.
Wait. So
I
why
never knew
are
that.
most black women single then?
that's a different conversation.
See, it
like,
just
you know what I'm
makes
saying?
no
Like,
sense.
That goes back to our first
I don't know.
topic about
Well,
complying to
well,
a man's needs.
Well, there's more women than men on the earth, period. I mean, so there's more black women than black men. So, I mean, if you do the math, every black woman can't be in a relationship with a black man. You know what I mean?
So my thing is that I feel like we hear a lot that there's a standard that and I'm obviously not black, I'm Portuguese. But you hear it that black men are almost harder on black women in relationships. It seems like they treat them, I don't know, like difficultly, like more like I don't know.
What's up, study group? Welcome to Black History Student. I'm your host, Black Butterfly. Today we'll be discussing why black men prefer non-black women. Because history has shown that although most black men remain loyal to black women, many believe that having a non-black woman, especially a white woman, is the master of all achievements. Social media has given the impression that black unions are fading and more black men are opting for interracial relationships. Now, while this may seem like reality, it actually isn't, because data shows that most black men marry or prefer black women, and only 24% date or marry outside of their race. Still, it's important to investigate why so many black men take such pride in proclaiming their preference for women of no color, and how it's impacting black familial relationships. Now, before I get into the pathology of these men's desire for whiteness, it's necessary to explore the history of their lust for white women. Interracial relationships between black men and white women have existed since antiquity. According to author J.A. Rogers, black men have been intrigued by white skin since at least the dynastic days in Egypt. In his book, Sex and Race, Negro-Caucasian Mixing in All Ages and All Lands, Volume 1, The Old World, he talks about race mixing during dynastic Egypt. He says that mixing between black and white might have begun even before the 5th dynasty. Flinders Petrie, speaking of the ruling race, says that there is a coarse type of mulatto appearance, and it is certain that there is much Negro blood in the oldest Egyptians. The Negroes were most likely to have mixed with the fair races which bounded to the north. He goes on to add that race mixing went on unrestricted in ancient Egypt until the population became a thoroughly mixed one. Some of the dynasties had a greater percentage of blacks and mulattoes, while others had more of whites. In the harems of the pharaohs were women of all colors and races, and it seemed that white women did not attain the status of the black ones for some time. Although black men have desired white women since their first interactions with white people, during those times, black women represented the essence of womanhood and symbolized purity. It wasn't until the institution of slavery dismantled the African cultural attitudes and ideals of blackness that the initiation of black men's hatred for black women began and their fantasy or even obsession of white women formed. Now, to fully understand how and why the black man's love and respect for white women eventually trumped that of black women, it is vital to be knowledgeable about the historical treatment of black men in the Western world. The psychological impact caused by white people who have maintained power and control over society's perception of blackness plays an integral role in why many black men prefer whiteness. During the colonial era, between the 17th and 18th centuries, America was populated by black slaves, Native Americans fighting for their lands, and unfavorable immigrants from Northern and Western Europe. And this includes tax dodgers, land proprietors, extremely poor people, elderly, criminals, convicts, beggars, vagrants, unemployed people, and other undesirable or rejected peoples of Europe. Life was hard and deprivation was commonplace for everyone during these eras. Furthermore, it was these centuries when white people permanently placed black people as socially inferior and viewed and treated them as less than human. According to Walter I. Trattner, in his book From Poor Law to Welfare State, A History of Social Welfare in America, he says that blacks were viewed by most colonists as uncivilized and permanently inferior, children of Satan, not entitled to the same rights as white people. Every indignity that could be committed against men had been perpetrated against black men, including humiliations and beatings, lynching, castration, R-word, and being forced to witness sexual assaults of women and children. After centuries in these conditions, the masses of black men have been essentially sterilized of their manhood and reduced to self-hating and self-loathing invisible individuals. And when I say invisible, I mean in the sense that white society had completely subjugated, marginalized, and disregarded them. In her book, Black Looks, Race and Representation, Bell Hooks explains the black invisibility to mainstream society when she says that since most white people do not have to see black people constantly appearing on billboards, television, movies, in magazines, etc., and they do not need to ever be on guard nor to observe black people to be safe, they can live as though black people are invisible. White people carried the religious and political beliefs from Europe that able-bodied individuals who failed to improve their poor conditions in society deserve to remain in them. Walter Trattner says that powerful religious and economic forces converged to see to it that there would be little sympathy for sturdy beggars. In this case, sturdy beggars were all the non-Aryan and Anglo-Saxon white peoples, Native Americans, and black slaves. From the time of their enslavement through the 20th century, most black men have been conditioned to become self-hating entities that view blackness as a lack of humanity and invisibility to the dominant society. Bell Hooks says, now many black people live in the bush of ghosts and do not know themselves separate from whiteness. Systems of domination, imperialism, colonialism, and racism actively coerce black folks to internalize negative perceptions of blackness, to be self-hating. Many of us succumb to this, yet blacks who imitate whites, adopting their values, speech, habits of being, etc., continue to regard whiteness with suspicion, fear, and even hatred. In terms of black men, this essentially means that they possess a love-hate struggle between fearing and hating whiteness for conquering them, but also desiring the fantasy of it because to them it represents power and status. And white women are thought to be the Christian ideal of perfection and purity, which black men were banned from accessing. These things put together mentally stunts them, allowing white men to reshape their self-hating identity to worship and imitate them. As part of their transformation into white men, most black men acculturate their beliefs, desires, ideals, and behaviors and worship all of their possessions, including white women. But after existing in the white man's patriarchal society for thousands of millenniums, the masses of white women share their beliefs that black men aren't even full human. And this was especially the case during colonialism and segregation. During these periods, as I said before, they resented them for being helpless, able-bodied men that lacked the ability to free themselves. Most white women loathed everything about blackness, and it didn't help that they were inured by white men to believe that all black men were sex-crazed, immoral degenerates out to R-word and harm them. So not only were black men detestable to these women, but they'd also been outlawed from even looking at them. And to make matters worse, white men simultaneously help themselves to black women at will, while preventing black men from freely pursuing their own women. Black men lived in these conditions for centuries, and this resulted in the annihilation of his dignity, pride, and will, essentially his manhood. During enslavement, it was a natural part of society to debase black women in the vilest ways, while black men could do nothing about it. Although multitudes tried, they ended up maimed, killed, or humiliated into submission. Black men were forced to bear witness to physical and sexual atrocities committed against black women and children that permanently broke their will and spirit. Over time, this caused many of them to resent themselves for being unable to protect their people and despise black women for being victims they were unable to defend. There's an author named Rajan Prasad who wrote a book called Why Black Men Love White Women, going beyond sexual politics to the heart of the matter, where he talks about the black man's inability to safeguard his family. Rajan said that there was absolutely no respect for the emotional existence of the black family. Entering slave quarters, the white man will walk past the black man and his children and defile any black female at will. The female could even be a child, and often was. He would also warn the black man that the experience had better be good, and oftentimes the black male would pledge that it would be, as if to provide the R word a sexual guarantee. On the way out, the R word would arrogantly acknowledge that it was good and rub the black man's head. This event would destroy the dignity and self-respect of any man and question his worth, as well as the reputation of his woman. Rajan goes on to add that dirt floors, barns, cotton fields, slave houses, back porches, bathrooms, outhouses, and any place one could imagine served as the theater for the slave master's pornographic exploits. Not only was the black woman brought down, but she was now dirty, used, abused, passed around, and been around. Over centuries of observing their women being defiled and treated like societal waste, many black men adopted the attitudes and ideals of the slave masters regarding black women. This was essentially a protection mechanism employed to justify being unable to protect their women. As a result, a significant portion of black men have convinced themselves that black women are spoiled goods, undeserving of their protection and provision. The media has made this fact very apparent, as they've shown a slew of black female celebrities being disrespected and humiliated publicly, while black men laugh, condone, or even encourage it. Tennis professionals Venus and Serena Williams are perfect examples of black women who black men failed to defend and protect, while mainstream disparaged and globally humiliated them. These sisters are the best tennis players in the world, and the fact that they're black women and athletically superior in the sport caused extreme jealousy and discontent in mainstream. The dominant society have suggested that the sisters' athleticism and success in the game are attributed to everything but their talent and abilities. Masculine, aggressive, and unattractive are the adjectives used to publicly describe them. In comparison, white female tennis players are said to be the standard of beauty and grace. Meanwhile, hardly any black men made noise in the media demanding that the sisters be respected or else. Instead, many jumped on the media train of disrespect and even added that Serena Williams looked like a man or a transsexual. Black women have been R-worded, beaten, whipped, spat on, humiliated, disrespected, and abused in ways that have shaped the black man's psyche, and the sight of them reminds him of his historic failure to fulfill the roles of manhood. A man is supposed to provide for, protect, and secure the livelihood of his women and children. All things that black men have been unable to do in this country.
What is your problem with black women? That's the real question.
Yo, bro, thank you for having this incredibly important conversation, and just thank you for standing on your box despite what some of these clowns are saying. I think a lot of us don't realize that we've been socialized to treat our sisters the way we treat them, right? Everything that we hear, everything that we listen to from the time that we young men, right, is, yo, they're here to please you. Bend them over, do this, do that. And so because our women are objectified, black women in particular, when they cease to please us, when they cease to exist as something that we can get something from, take something from, they become an itch, this, that, and they're easily discarded because we never regarded them as full human beings in the first place. And the saddest part about this is that this kind of behavior, this kind of mentality is rooted in slavery. When they took our women, abused our women, raped our women, and literally objectified black women as those who we can get sexual pleasure from or get children from that we may or may not claim. That's what the slave master did. So when we talk about the behavior of black men and how little regard, how little respect we have for sisters, when we actually identify where that behavior is rooted at, it should terrify us. You talking about flee? We should flee from that, because all we replicating, all we duplicating over and over again is what the slave master did to our families and did to our women.
Author Rajan Prasad says that the history and circumstance that has soiled the black woman's image has continued to direct the black man's mind away from her, away from that desperate sight, and towards that which he has yearned to be recognized by, the white woman. His goal is to be loved and accepted by those he was designed to worship in order for his dignity to triumph. He adds that he sees himself as a historic failure, failing to provide for his family, protect his woman, and secure a livelihood. Additionally, he finds it difficult to connect as the symbol of his systemic failure. By giving birth to him in bondage, she represents the synthesis for his circumstance. The precious gift of life, which was once cherished, has now become a curse. Her womb was a graveyard as life became death. As a result, he will chase the white woman to the ends of the earth and will stop only when he catches his mind. At the same time that black men were subconsciously separating themselves from black women, many were obsessing over whiteness. They mentally cemented black women as being irreparably soiled and were trained to view white women as the perfect representation of womanhood. She was all the things a woman should be: pure, clean, and an exemplification of social achievement. The problem was that she was legally prohibited from him. The black man could be crucified if caught even looking at white women, and many were. Rajan Prasad said that on the other side, the white woman was held up as the pure Christian ideal example of womanhood. And, more important, she was completely off limits to the black man. If the eyes of a black man were to land on a white woman, it could mean death. Black men were dehumanized through whipping, hanging, castration, decapitation, burning, drowning, dismembering, and various other forms of atrocious human behavior simply to right the wrongs of a casual glance. But the more white men banned black men from accessing white women, the more curious black men became about them. What was it about these women that made them forbidden fruit? Why did white men enforce such severe punishments to protect her? Why was she God's treasure over all women on earth? This curiosity to some extent morphed into an obsession in many black men. Consequently, they grew a strong desire to acquire white women for two reasons. One, they wanted to defile her worse than the white man had done to black women. And two, they wanted to experience purity in all of its glory that could only be provided by her. Rajan Prasad says that this environment helped to greatly increase any interest the black man may have had in the white woman. Just being denied the ability to even look at someone would create an interest. And over the years, an obsession would develop, a phenomenon that is still evident in many black men. Additionally, the white man's relationship with the black woman and his protection of white women created an appetite of vengeful lust within many black men, as well as a deep interest by the white woman. By the time slavery was abolished, black women being the nemesis and the ideal of acquiring white women representing ultimate social achievement had already begun in the subconsciousness of many black men. But it was information disseminated by propaganda instruments such as schools, religious institutions, textbooks, newspapers, magazines, television, films, videos, games, radio, billboards, music, poetry, essays, novels, etc. that cemented black women as undesirable and white women as the symbol of power. Propaganda created images of whiteness, especially white women, designed to shape the perspectives in black men, training them to prefer white women over black women. Rajan Prasad says that propaganda is probably the most powerful reason a black man will turn to a white woman. And the media propagandists have shaped his perspective and bent his emotional twig, which will keep his form forever. His actions will, more often than not, mirror the perspective of that which he has been trained to lean toward. The media is the most powerful instrument used to indoctrinate societal beliefs and actions. This power has been used to annihilate blackness in all human activities, especially social relationships. Rajan Prasad adds that the media is the most powerful and prolific instrument of propaganda used to destroy the black race's intellectual, social, political, human, and sexual integrity. It shattered the self-worth and crippled their capacity to love and respect one another. It sent black men, women, and children on mental journeys away from one another and served as a throttle to accelerate the black man's psychosexual excursion toward the white woman. Although the slave masters' perverted and debasing ideals of black women have been transferred to black men, Hollywood films mentally solidified them. Most black men possessed no desire for black women and promoted myths about them that exist today, including being masculine and aggressive. But white women are held as fit, feminine, friendly, cooperative, and submissive, which is said to represent the essence of womanhood. Rajan Prasad says that early American movies had white women in their most pristine and perfect state, while her black counterpart was fat, greasy, Jemima-looking, sexless beings. Images of black women wearing nappy pigtails, shabby work clothes, or maid uniforms that created an image of inferiority. It often appeared that grease, rather than powder, was used as makeup for black women. He goes on to add that Hollywood greatly participated in scripting the continued separation of the races, but its subtext also served to separate black folks from one another. The residual effect was the unexpected desire the black man developed for the white woman. Films reinforced stereotypes that helped to massacre a people's social, political, and human integrity. And as the black race's humanity declined, the black man's desire for the white woman intensified exponentially. Because black men would be crucified for pursuing white women, initially they settled for light-skinned black women. The more accomplished the man, the lighter the woman would usually be. But having a light-skinned woman wasn't enough to calcify being a man. Black men couldn't protect anyone, not even themselves, and most were incapable of providing for their women and children. And to make matters worse, they lacked genuine status and social honor because they were banned from white women. This caused their growing lust to morph into rage, putting the fear of God in white men. So clearly something needed to be done. So in 1967, the courts had ruled in the Loving versus Virginia case that banning interracial relationships was deemed unconstitutional. With the new laws in place, black men officially had legal access to white women without fear of punishment. And trust and believe, many of them took full advantage of their new privileges. Having a white woman was empowering and intoxicatingly liberating. To have one suggests ultimate social achievement and power for many black men. White elites were satisfied with this because 1, most white women detest and fear black men and wouldn't dare defile themselves being with one. And 2, white women that show interest in black men are considered white female trash in mainstream society. So there is no love lost without them. Consequently, with the white men granting them the ability to pursue their women, 7 types of black men that prefer non-black women had manifested. And this includes the self-haters, the status builders, the undesirables, those with bad experiences, those with no racial pride, those that lack access to black women, and those that were raised by non-black women. Alright, study group, before I go on, please take a few seconds to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to know when new videos are released or when I go live. This is a significant way to support the channel, so I'd really appreciate it if you go ahead and do that for me. I'll even take a moment of silence to let you do it. Okay, thank you, study group. I really appreciate your support. I really do. Now let's continue. Okay, so let's talk about the self-haters. Many black men that hate themselves put much value on whiteness because 1, white people have conditioned them to. 2, white men possess power and control over the entire world. And 3, they deem whiteness as success and status. Everything about blackness is thought to epitomize inhumanity, ugliness, and darkness. And therefore, black men internalize these ideals and reject themselves for being black. One way they accomplish this is by procreating with white women to erase their blackness through their offspring. These men parade their white women around, imitating the white man while flaunting their biracial children that possess little to no black physical features. These types of men have no qualms with publicly persecuting blackness, especially in front of a white audience. They aim to convince white people that they are human, unlike the other blacks, and therefore deserve access to the mantle of manhood. They denounce everything about blackness and take on racist and stereotypical attitudes about black people. Many of these men have been abused by their black mothers or by black women that may have raised them. These types of women tended to refer to blackness as ugly and repulsive. Several black men brought up by abusive black women tell the stories of hearing, "You worthless black bastard, you ugly black piece of shit, I'll beat your black ass ain't gonna never be shit," etc. Former football player Tiki Barber is known for his preference of white women and has made comments about why he doesn't date black women, allegedly stating that, "I won't date any woman that reminds me of my mother." The darker the skin, the more abuse the man received both by loved ones and peers. Young black girls gave more attention to the light-skinned black boys, mocking the dark boys, treating them essentially as inferior. Indoctrinated by marginalized messages from their family, community, and society as a whole, black men grow to detest blackness at a very young age. Rajan Prasad says that when one has been marginalized, dehumanized, criminalized, and ostracized, one is starved of the basic social nourishment needed to exist in a society. It leaves the individual unrecognized, unaccomplished, and unnecessary. Power and control are oftentimes the sensible nourishment that would appease this hunger, and if that power isn't attainable, a substitute becomes an option. Instead of real power, false power is the only viable alternative. Professor Crawford says, "Power gives meaning and form to virtually every relationship in the Western cultural context. These facts are even more pressing among Africans in a society that teaches them to view themselves as powerless power seekers." One of the most significant ways a black man can achieve a false sense of power is through the imitation of the white character or by a romantic relationship with the white woman. To self-hating black men, achieving such an accomplishment gives them value, status, and envy from other black men. They're no longer invisible in society with the white woman on their arm, and this superficially compensates for the internal detestation they possess of blackness. These type of black men highly appreciate the stares and glares they get from black women and other men of no color when they're displaying their white prize. This puts a pep in their step because they were able to accomplish something their ancestors had only dreamt of. Furthermore, the high fives and praises of "you made it" they receive from other black men for having a white woman makes wearing black skin more bearable, for without it, the white woman would be insignificant. Several celebrity entertainers have no qualms revealing their disdain for black women and their preference for white ones. For instance, Pharrell Williams have supposedly said that he refused to date a woman whose skin is darker than his, and he went on to supposedly say that it's not my responsibility to represent black women anyway. Moreover, sellout Charles Barkley is another lighter-skinned black man that has allegedly expressed self-hating comments about dark skin. He supposedly said that when I was recruited at Auburn University, they took me to a strip joint. When I saw those titties on Buffy, I knew then that I could never date another black woman. These men have disassociated from their blackness, replacing it with a white identity. In many cases, self-hating black men tend to project their internal hate onto the non-white women they're with. Once the high of acquiring a woman of no color is over, these women typically don't get better treatment, despite the men saying they're better women. At one point, non-black women gleefully boasted of being the better option for black men until they witnessed the severity of his oppressive mental state. Now these women are coming out in droves, confessing of being abandoned as a single mother, brutally attacked, left used, abused, and confused by these self-hating men.
Black men are misogynistic and treat women and their women, but just women as a whole, the same way that white men do. And as we know, the patriarchy was originated by white supremacy and white men. Of course, it started during slavery, which is what I find ironic, because during slavery, well, black men, you were treated as less than human to these white men who are on these podcasts preaching this misogynistic ideologies that they invented. So basically, all these white men that are on these podcasts speaking for men and spreading this misogynistic ideologies, they see you as also less than human, black man. They see you just as marginalized and less than human the same way they see women. So why the fuck are you trying to be at a party that you are not invited to. See, you feel because you are a man, you have some sort of privilege or power or sense of inclusion in this male supremacy patriarchy. Behind your back, these men are laughing at you and they don't respect you. No matter how much money you get, as we've seen by Kanye, you're still an N-word in a coupe, as he said, when it all falls down. You're still black. They want to unalive you. They want to enslave you. They want to emasculate you. They're jealous of you. But you get involved in misogyny and the oppression of women and the abuse of women and the, oppression Olympics and misogyny Olympics because you want to have a false sense of power and inclusion after being oppressed. And you would think it would be the other way around, that as a black man who is also just as marginalized as women are in society by these men, that you would have some sort of more empathy and compassion for women than other men. You would think black men would have more empathy and compassion for women than almost any other group of men because of the oppression and trauma that black men have endured as being a marginalized group. But you just want to be a part of this patriarchy and this false sense of inclusion and this false sense of power and this little bit of power that you get that boosts your ego by oppressing women and being able to have power over women's lives. And it's funny, you're just a pawn in their game for them to execute this ideology and really put it out there. You guys are just bodies, soldiers, and votes that they need. They're manipulating you. You're literally following white supremacist values disguised as misogyny and pro-men, and you don't even realize you're like Cheddar Bob and 8 Mile shooting yourself in the foot. These same men that you idolize and watch and get these ideologies from don't see you as a human. They see you as 3/4 of a human. They were the same ones who gaslighted black people into doing slavery by saying, oh, a black man is worth 10 Native Americans, which was just gaslighting to extort black men to work harder and treat them like shit. Why are you misogynist? You know, it's funny, they would like you to believe I'm their preference, but that's just triangulation. See, my baby father used to do the same thing to me. He'd be like, oh, I prefer Spanish women. I prefer black women. They do the same thing to all of us. So when they get around you, it's, oh, I love them white girls. They're going to do it to any group they're around. They're going to compare you to another woman to triangulate you and make you feel bad. That's just manipulation. We are not their preference. We're just a trophy that they say, hey, I got a white girl. But they just abuse us and mistreat us and don't take us seriously. We're just sex objects. And we're just there to flaunt around and maybe get ahead. And then they think white women have money so they can try to use them for their money and status and shit like that. And to be more accepted around white men. But yeah, no, they do the same thing to me. Like when my ex would abuse me in public and I'd be asking for help, he would go up to the black woman and be like, no, she's a white girl trying to lie on me and get me arrested. I ain't doing nothing. You know these white women. You can't trust them. She's trying to take a black man down. And black women will fall for that too. But he will switch sides. Anytime it was convenient, 1 minute it's, I love Spanish women. 1 minute I love white women. The next minute, I hate white women. 1 minute, this is what I get for getting with a white woman. I should have never got with a white woman. Then they turn on you and they recruit a bunch of flying monkeys who are going to support the narrative and be so quick to comfort him like, yes, baby. You know you shouldn't have got with them white women. Come here, abusive, narcissistic, psychopathic man. You know you're better with me than a white woman. You know I can treat your narcissistic, abusive ass way better than that white woman could. It's all manipulation. Trust me, we are not their preference. Plenty of black men told me, oh, I thought white women smelled like bologna and y'all look like raw chicken, and basically are disgusted to even mess with a white woman, make fun of each other for dealing with a white woman, and make it seem like it's literally the scum of the earth thing to do. It's just novelty. So don't believe the triangulation. It's all manipulation that they just say to make every bitch feel inferior to each other, when in reality, they're the ones that feel inferior inside. They just have to put women down to make themselves feel high up. Race is actually an illusion. Racism was created the same way the gender system was created, to create oppression and a power dynamic and a hierarchy. That's what it is. My ex tried to get with her, and her ex tried to get with me. That shit don't fucking matter, bro. This is true. This shit don't matter, bro. Their preference is pussy.
Now let's talk about the status builders. So to many black men, especially those in the white spotlight, such as entertainers, acquiring white women represents advancement in class and status. Having a white woman on their arm is the ultimate social achievement and promotes acceptance by most white people. They appear non-threatening to whites as they forfeited their scary black exterior and use their white woman as an external white shield. Since black men have always been viewed as morally degenerate with no self-control, a black man with a white woman seems benign and safe to white people. Many black men feel that it's better to be near whites than not to be, for they aren't morally substandard like black people, and it's only through them that success and power can be achieved.
In my experience and all the other white girls that I know, we don't think that getting attention from black guys gives you a status of some sort. If you get attention from the white guys, you do have the status more than if you get attention from black guys.
As a man, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with that.
Well, as a woman who gets attention and who grew up in a white culture more than a black culture, I'm going to tell you that getting attention from black guys is not a badge of honor if you're white. She's basically not good enough for the white, so she's good for the black guys.
These black men are considered providers and protectors, but only to white women. They treat white women better than they've ever treated a black woman. They spend more money on white women, they are kinder, more respectful, and possess a sense of power by having her. These men live in white neighborhoods, frequent white establishments, send their children to white schools, all while pretending they've shed their blackness. They tend to be educated, middle to upper middle class, liberal, upperly mobile, aware, and in many cases politically active. Many of these are the conscious or woke black men that actively and publicly fight against racial oppression against black people, even boldly in front of a white audience. There are so many black men that fight the good old fight, but go home to their white preference and biracial children while living in a white community, many times gated. The wealth of black men that talk black but lay white is absolutely astonishing. Some of the most profound black scholars wore their white cap once the microphones were off and the books were closed. I was flabbergasted after learning that the renowned late African historian and scholar Dr. Sheikh Anadia, Cornel West, and even Henry Skip Gates are all married to white women. And I love Dr. Sheikh. I look up to him. I have studied all of his work. And when I learned that he was married to a white woman, my jaw dropped. I gawped for days, slobbing, drooling, the whole 9 yards. I couldn't believe it. Hell, even Martin Luther King had white mistresses. Black intellectuals that fight for black rights literally only fight to have access to white women in peace. I am so convinced that they want the white man privileges and freedoms to be with white women. I'm wondering if there are any black intellectuals that fight for black rights that are actually into black women. Because I'm convinced that there aren't any. And if they're not interested in white women, they don't marry black women. They sleep around like dogs with fleas. Celebrities that actively fight for black rights but prefer white women are so prominent that it seems as if black male success is synonymous to white imitation. Shannon Sharpe is the most treacherous of this scenario. He is an extremely articulate, well-manicured celebrity with super black skin and a desire for white women. He gives all of his earnings to white women and white society to sustain the family that he structured in the image of the white man. In other words, his God. Also, there are several black YouTube content creators that are very knowledgeable about the system of white supremacy and actively attempt to unite the African continent with African Americans. These guys spend time in different parts of the world, especially Africa, and have grown to recognize the disconnect between the plentiful African nations and black Americans. I personally find their work quite admirable and really respect what they're accomplishing. Their platforms are large and they make really good money from their efforts. However, they take all of those accolades and that wealth to their white preference, her family, their biracial children, and live and build in the white community. These black men grow to despise black women for exposing the guilt and shame they feel for imitating white men.
You know, let me let y'all know something real quick. When y'all speak about men, talking about the preference, the preference, see what the preference did? You're upset that the preference isn't you. So what you do is you sit up here and use the term preference and you celebrate if the man's preference don't treat him right, do him wrong, etc. I said a long time ago, a lot of these modern women are evil. They're evil. Because you don't want some of them, fellas, they want to see your demise. And I keep bringing up Kevin Samuels because he is a person that in recent history, we got to see the venom of these modern women when someone either doesn't want them or correcting them or telling them, get your head out the clouds and get back into reality. Now, of course, I called out that guy in the video, but I want y'all to see, they want to see harm come to y'all. Hope you know that.
You ever notice that oftentimes these black men rarely speak about their white family publicly, but behind the black closet doors, they're so proud to have their non-black woman. They accept everything that comes with having those women, even to their own detriment. And it doesn't matter that she or her racial group rejects blackness, because these men will ignore the racism or justify the disrespect by being delusional, convincing themselves that those beliefs don't necessarily apply to them. Ultimately, they even adopt the white man's attitude, using the same language to justify their relationship and racist beliefs. I have a clip of a white woman from TikTok who perfectly describes the indoctrinated and colonized mindset of these black men. Let's take a look at this clip.
What I saw in my comment section over the last 4 days now, because I'm almost at 2,000 comments, is that black men speak like the white women they're with now in America. And I'm going to be real honest, I didn't realize so many black men were only dating white women or non-black women, but I'm not going to go into that in this video either. But there are thousands of you still. I thought that was like a 90s trend. It was done in like 2001. Here we are. And now you're talking like them. Disenfranchised. And what I see, because I grew up in an incredibly racist conditioning like all the white people in America, regardless of if they admit it or not, is that, see, when they were in college and they were fun and everything was having just a party, it was cool to be in that interracial relationship where you were still a black man, your own identity, your own person, your own being. But now y'all have been married 10 years and y'all got 3 kids and y'all live in the suburbs in that gated community, and that whole white world, as long as they accept you, she's going to be happy. So you can be a black man, but not that kind of black man. You can be the black man that white people feel is acceptable and will allow them around their, groups and social events and the PTO. And all of the people commenting in my comment section are predominantly upper middle class. So when I go to their Facebook pages and I see that they live these upper middle class lives, I'm really understanding that it's a whitewashing of identity. And it doesn't happen overnight. If you look at anything when it comes to social construct, it does take 3 generations to actually make something truly happen. It's almost as if white supremacy knew that a whole bunch of rich white girls were going to have a mandingo fetish. So they decided to perpetuate the idea that we'll get black men in their clutches. And then eventually, over time and generations, the children will not only be lighter, but all that blackness will just be washed away unless it's appropriate and acceptable in the white world we've pulled them into with our clutches. I'm not going to debate anybody about this subject. What I said was what I said. What I would love to see is people thinking and changing their mindsets about the social construct of interracial relationships. Because until any of y'all deconstruct, decolonize, and learn new patterns of behavior that are not conditioned in Jim Crow, you're just repeating cycles. I don't care how many biracial children you have, and say love sees no color. Because we're all conditioned in this society. It's just a big fucking science experiment. So keep on keeping on, hating on me and growing all my platforms. Thank you very much. And I'm going to continue to talk about the things that I know we need to talk about in this society that I am conditioned and brought up in as well. Oh, and FYI, rarely ever dated white men married to 2 men that aren't even American and have 3 biracial children. But I don't feel the need to weaponize my personal relationships and tell you how good my interracial relationships are or were in order to talk about the truth of what really is going on in this society in a bigger picture. It's called critical thinking. Happy dating.
Now, to be fair, many times these types of black men do a lot to give back to the black community. I mean, they employ black people and donate to black causes. But the fact remains they are aware and conscious enough to recognize that the main issue with the black community is the breakdown of the black family structure. Moreover, they know that this failure is attributed to the system of white supremacy, which comprises the entire global white collective's control over all the world's human activities, including economic, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The white powers maintain dominance and control over the entire global black collective. Therefore, if a black man is building the white man's empire with their imitated white existence, how is that helping the black plight? Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a letter to the White House back in 1965 specifically to convince the president to help the black men build black families. He recognized that black people function civilly and healthy when there's a strong family foundation based on African principles. In the letter, Moynihan said that it has to be said that there is a considerable body of evidence to support the conclusion that the Negro social structure, in particular the Negro family, battered and harassed by discrimination, injustice, and uprooting, is in the deepest trouble. While many young Negroes are moving ahead in unprecedented levels of achievement, many more are falling further and further behind. It is more difficult, however, for whites to perceive the effect that 3 centuries of exploitation have had on the fabric of Negro society itself. Here, the consequences of the historic injustices done to Negro Americans are silent and hidden from view. However, there is considerable evidence that the Negro community is in fact dividing between a stable middle class group that is steadily growing stronger and more successful and an increasingly disorganized and disadvantaged lower class group. Now, after the Moynihan report was published, the government ensured that education and employment opportunities would be made available to black men. The goal was for these men to marry black women and provide for their black children. In other words, to build the black family. This granted many black men higher education and jobs that paid substantially well, advancing countless black men that may have been poor to middle class or even affluent status. But what these men didn't do with their success was build black families. Most of them took their new white achievements and status to white communities to imitate white men. And guess where this left black women? Yup, in the ghetto with the children the men abandoned to fend for themselves. What's interesting is, during the eras of thriving ancient African kingdoms, African men would go off to various European countries for education. Prior to their departure, the elders would inform them that you are to go for education and to bring it back home for your people. You are not to go for a wife. If you find a wife, do not come back. See, African elders understood that black men that build with white women serve no purpose to black people. They are self-centered individuals, or sellouts as far as I'm concerned, that have abandoned their blackness to succumb to the white idea of manhood. It doesn't matter that they talk or walk black, because in the end they lay white, making them hypocritical at least and counterproductive to black people at best. Wealth makes black men appear benign and attractive to not only white women, but white men too. Black men that acquire success are not blatantly disrespected by white men, for they've overcome their oppressive plight and found a way to climb to the top of the white mountain, warranting them some form of respect. But the overwhelming fact is that powerful white men will put on a mask of acceptance for wealthy black men, but behind closed doors, they still consider them partial humans that they don't want near their white daughters. Nevertheless, there are so few wealthy black men that white men don't view them as competition or a threat of any sort. Furthermore, there are even more white women that despise black men than not. Therefore, white men are capable of overlooking the few white women that they believe degrade themselves to be with black men. Let's talk about the undesirable black men that prefer non-black women. So, the undesirable black men are those that black women don't find attractive or suitable at all. These are the men that are considered invisible to black women and are incapable of acquiring the type of black women that they prefer. Most of these men tend to typically be uneducated and seen incapable of learning. They have extremely terrible attitudes, poor hygiene, typically impoverished or unemployed, overweight and lazy, possess very low self-esteem and lack confidence, and they typically have no ambition. Now, being ignored and humiliated, these black men are angry and decide to try their luck with other races of women. And to their advantage, many non-black women possess a different set of qualifications for black men compared to black women. Unattractive black men are actually intriguing to non-black women because these women are mainly enticed by black skin, which trumps physical features. And because these women fetishize black flesh, undesirable black men are given attention and taken more seriously by them than black women.
I do want to ask y'all a question, which is going to be very important. Are you fetishizing black men?
Yes.
So what is it about the black men that you think you fetishize?
It's different. Culturally, it's different. Just how the lady said, more masculine. You guys have very high self-confidence. What most men in Europe, white men, probably Hispanic men, they're not sure what they're talking. They're not sure how they want to approach you. I think it's a stereotype, but black guys, you see something you like, you go for it, you do what you gotta do, boom, the lady is yours. Just like that.
Author Michele Wallace describes the white woman's desire for black flesh in her book, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman, when she says that some white women were quite blunt. They wanted black cock because it was the best cock there was. White women make undesirable black males feel like men with power, and therefore these men proclaim that they are more feminine, friendly, submissive, and overall suitable, opposed to black women. These men are so proud to rub their white achievements in the faces of black women, parading white women around as to display their physical manhood. Nevertheless, as was the case when they were actively desiring black women and were ignored, black women still disregard these men and don't allocate much weight to their love for whiteness. Michele Wallace says that some black women would laugh low in their throats when they saw a black man with a white woman and make cracks about his high water pants or his flat head or his walk. Anything that might suggest that he was inadequate. Only the rejects crawl for white pussy. Undesirable black men generally don't date or marry quality non-black women, regardless of their income status. These men get the undesirable or rejected women of no color that non-black men simply don't want. Most of these guys claim that they want a fit, feminine, and friendly woman, but the non-black women they choose are typically overweight, rough, and aggressive. These women never come from wealthy families or prestigious backgrounds. Dr. Umar Johnson perfectly summarizes the undesirable interracial relationship between black men and non-black women in the following clip. Let's take a look.
Black men get the white women that other white men genuinely do not want. You don't get the top of the line white women. You don't. You get leftovers. Look at most of our celebrities. They did not marry women who came from the richest white families. Black money and white money don't behave the same. New black money and old white money have two totally different personalities. New black money will jump on any poor white girl and make her a billionaire, Tiger Woods. Rich white woman, rich white money doesn't operate that way, you see.
Now, Dr. Umar couldn't have said it any better. Black men that date outside of their race lack dignity and would take a poor white woman and essentially give her everything he got. It's pathetic, and it only reveals the severity of their subjugated mentality. Let's talk about the black guys that have had bad experiences and as a result prefer non-black women. Now, many black men that prefer non-black women claim to have had terrible experiences with black women. These experiences may include being raised by abusive black women, disrespectfully rejected, sexually denied, cheated on, challenged during co-parenting or with child support, or verbally and mentally mistreated by black women. In many cases, some black men take on the views and experiences of other men that hate black women, despite not having had poor encounters themselves. These men tend to vehemently spew the disrespectful rhetoric about black women they've been indoctrinated to believe. In most cases, some black men were in relationships with black women where they claim to have been abused both physically and mentally, which turned them completely off to black women. For instance, black actor Wesley Snipes has been accused of disliking black women, allegedly saying, "There are black women still who get an attitude. I don't want to come home to someone who's going to be mean and aggravating and unkind and who is going to be please me, please me." He asserted that black women have insulted him for his dark skin, whereas he's been treated better by non-black women. Just like Snipes, a significant portion of black men have also been bullied in their adolescence for being physically unappealing by both black girls and boys. This causes them to grow up resenting black people altogether and end up assimilating into white culture and imitating white men. The bottom line is that these men usually don't learn and grow from their poor experiences. For instance, if they were raised by a terrible black woman, instead of forfeiting their blackness, it would be rational to acquire counseling to heal from the trauma. Chances are if they were abused as a child and decided to run away from being black as a result, they're not going to do anything but take that baggage to the non-black side and end up giving someone else a bad experience. Also, black men that claim to have been mentally or physically abused by black women typically don't admit their role in the supposed bad experience. They fail to divulge the intensity of the verbal, mental, or emotional abuse that they inflicted in the relationship. And their poor communication skills and habitual cheating are irrelevant and play no role in that situation. The point is that there's typically more to the story than just an anecdotal bad situation, especially if it can drive one completely against the women in their entire racial group. Okay, so let's talk about the black men that prefer non-black women that lack racial pride. Most black men aren't raised to appreciate and embrace blackness. As a matter of fact, many of them aren't taught about the significance of black culture at all, aside from the common sense thought that black represents disgrace in society. Black culture in many cases isn't interpreted and understood as a complex system of knowledge and beliefs, art, laws, customs, capabilities, and habits of black people. Instead, it tends to be summarized as ghetto behaviors, hip-hop, especially gangster rap, artistical degeneracy, criminal perpetuity, poor education, broken English, ebonics, sanctimonious hypocritical Christianity, dysfunctionality, and the lack of unity. Authors Flavio Francisco Marsiglia and Stephen Coolidge wrote a book titled Diversity, Oppression, and Change, where they talked about how influential cultural background is. They said that cultural background influences the way people think and act. Many take these cultural influences for granted and often are unaware of their profound impact on their lives and the lives of others. Members of cultural minorities affect their daily thoughts, conversations, and interactions, often reminding them that others view and treat them as different. Culture not only is a distinctive set of prescriptions about how to act and what to expect in the world, but also is a source of strength and inspiration that helps people cope with the daily stressors they face. Several black men have grown in environments where the culture weakened them and only inspired them to avoid it as adults. The behaviors and attitudes of lower class black people can be utterly humiliating to some blacks, and those with no racial pride escape the culture to disassociate from it. Rajan Persaud summarized these characteristics as nigger shit, which he defines as a form of behavior that is another residual of racism. Nigger shit seeks to identify specific madness in the black community that is very self-destructive. It is the sort of behavior one develops, a pathological desire to live in it and love it, while others choose to escape it. He goes on to add that, I have witnessed black men completely check out of being black. It's just too much of a burden. In addition to socially exiting a race, many of these men may also become effeminate and lose any male swagger they may have had. They feel if they can eliminate the black threat, black male sexuality, that it will help them assimilate better. Of course, everyone still knows they are black, but they believe they have transcended race and have become a colorless, cultureless, ethnicity-free being. Now, all black folks know what nigger shit is. Examples of nigger shit is a black man shooting at a festival where family and children are attending, or walking into a restaurant smelling like they took a swim in an ocean of marijuana, talking loud in quiet places to show defiance, or throwing trash on the ground where garbage cans are accessible, or hanging out on street corners or in front of stores, are just a few examples of nigger shit. These behaviors are deemed typical of black people in white society, so a man with no racial pride would do anything to prove that he's definitely not the same as these types of blacks. Black culture in poor settings have shown to influence black boys and men to think and act in a way that reflects their daily thoughts, conversations, and interactions, which oftentimes are corrupt and immoral. For the most part, black people aren't taught about their rich history, including being the reason there is civilization today. Without ancient black ancestors, there wouldn't be any medicines or agriculture or commerce and trade or any other basic necessity for human advancement. Black men with no racial pride have been instilled to believe that they were only slaves that didn't contribute anything to civilization. Then they're indoctrinated from the moment of birth to accept that whiteness represents good, strength, success, and all things positive. And their poor black environment, overwhelmed by crime, drugs, and utter dysfunction, only validated this fantasy of whiteness. Therefore, when young black boys from this type of atmosphere become adults, they tend to assimilate into white culture, as they have no reason to have any pride in their blackness. These are the love is love and you can't help who you love black men. And although it is true that you can't help who you love, black men with racial pride ensure that whoever they love will certainly be black. So essentially, by assimilating, These black men are able to reject black culture to adopt a non-black society where the values and behaviors are more acceptable and gives them a positive sense of identity. Therefore, it's easy to erase or neglect black heritage when it has no significance or relevance to their identity to begin with. A perfect example of black men with no racial pride are the two black boys from the Fresh and Fit podcast. These men are some of the most disrespectful, self-hating, undesirable black men in all existence. Listen to some of their detestable views.
Your preference aren't black women.
I would say
that's not what y'all prefer.
If I'm gonna go off with like preferences and looks, hey man, give me a fine ass Latina or white girl. I'll take that all day. Keeping that buck.
It's not what we normally both go for, right? Because we have a somewhat similar taste. I like my girls a little thinner than him, but
I like them thick.
It's just like
have y'all had bad experiences? That's why y'all feel like that?
Nah. Honestly speaking, like I'm from Barbados, bro. The girls are cool. You feel me? Like they're down to earth. I come here to America. I see some crazy black chicks, yes. Crazy white chicks, yes. But my thing is like, okay, in my experience, going off of like what I see from the outside looking in, sometimes I'm just like, yo.
Like we date all races, just that it doesn't tend to be our preference normally.
How did y'all moms are black, right?
Yeah.
Okay, why go away from that? Like,
you know what's funny? My mom would always be like, hey, we never gonna bring a black girl home, man. I'm like, yo, I've done that, but they're not here right now. You feel me? Like, I don't know, bro.
Now, after watching that, who needs narcissistic, undesirable black men when there's Fresh and Fit? These men are visually unappealing, unoriginal in thought, and overly confident. But now that they have access to non-black women, they mistake their misogynistic, self-hating views for masculinity and manhood. What's worse is that the darkest one is from Barbados, and the lighter one has Ethiopian roots, and both have black mothers. Yet they proudly claim to prefer non-black women. This is the humiliating results when black men possess no racial pride. Okay, so let's get into the black men that lack access to black women. Now, black men that lack access to black women are typically those that reside in predominantly white environments, where there are little to no black women available. Many of these men aren't opposed to dating or marrying black women, but they simply aren't in close proximity to them. For instance, the black man living in states such as Vermont or Maine, West Virginia, New Hampshire, Wyoming, Montana, or even Idaho, where over 90% of the residents are white, are most likely to date and marry white women. This is also the case for black men that attend predominantly white institutions for education. However, it would be foolish to ignore the wealth of black men that deliberately place themselves in white environments specifically to access white women. Rajan Prasad says that I interviewed many young black men who made calculated efforts to place themselves in environments that are more conducive to attracting a white woman. They would frequent bars, health clubs, night spots for months in order to develop relationships that would quiet fears about black men. I know two brothers who deliberately joined outrageously expensive health clubs in order to be around white women. At school, they'd abandoned their black counterparts in order to become a social mascot for the white student body. Like spies, they became operatives in their own sexual mission to conquer white women, gathering intelligence by guessing the social taste and even changing their uniforms in order to fit in. They take on new and less threatening personalities and often shoot to the very top of the popularity pile around their new peers. In the United States military, black women represents 28.92% of active duty members compared to 71.08% of non-black women. Consequently, many black men in the military are exposed to more non-black women than not, and this is one reason why most of them aren't married to black women. Moreover, there are a significant portion of black militants that claim that black women in the military are disinterested in them, forcing them to pursue non-black women. This is especially the case if men live overseas in countries with minimal black women. There are several black men that live in Japan, Thailand, or even Germany, where the black female population is minuscule. Finally, let's talk about the black men that prefer non-black women that were raised by non-black women. Now, some black men that prefer non-black women in numerous cases are biracial and have been raised by their non-black mothers. It is very common for a man to prefer a woman that looks like their mother, which is why so many biracial men with white mothers end up with white women. In most cases, These men aren't taught to respect and appreciate blackness and see no reason to build black-specific families. They tend to gravitate to women in their environment, which is typically a non-black area. Also, adopted black boys raised by non-black families are likely to date and marry non-black women. These men tend to view the world through the lens of the non-black family that raised them and possess a distorted, colorblind perception of the world. In this sense, black is just a meaningless color that serves no purpose to preserve, and therefore bleeding out the blackness by interracial procreation isn't a big concern. We talked a lot about the 24% of black men that prefer non-black women, but despite this, there are even more black men that have a strong sense of racial pride and are loyal to black women. Now, I have a clip of 3 black men that express their appreciation of black women and blackness, which aligns with the attitude of majority of good black men. And I have to stress good black men because obviously this isn't the case. Even black men that prefer black women don't necessarily possess a strong sense of racial pride. So I have to emphasize good black men. Now, these men claim they don't care for interracial relationships because of their love and loyalty to black women. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
The very first question is, why was it so important to only date black women?
For me, I love myself. And so, I had just come to the conclusion one day, just, when you think about the society as a whole, when you love yourself, you want to be with someone that mirrors yourself. You understand what I'm saying? And you want your children to reflect you, and not just internally or culturally and psychologically, but even physically. I love the way I look, when I look in the mirror, and so for me to have seeds that look like me, I should be with a woman that looks like me, and I actually love it. It's not like, it's not just principle, but it's also something that, means a lot to me. That, so for me, that's why it was important for me to be with a black woman. But on top of that, my mother gave me a good example of what a black woman is, and so, recognizing that example, I'm not tainted with any, crazy ideas of what black women are. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I see how certain ideas can be pushed, and then, I can compare that with my mom and say, it doesn't really,
doesn't fit.
So, really my mom is like, the best example of black womanhood I've ever seen. And so, I base my decisions on that.
I like that, because a lot of black people specifically have mommy issues. And I've actually heard that I might be moving ahead of it, but I've actually heard black men say that it's one of the reasons why they don't want to date black women anymore, because of what they've seen their mom do, or how she acted and how she portrayed. So that's really good. That's very interesting and really good to hear. Okay. Any one of you want to answer?
Yeah. It is a form of like self-realization. You know what I'm saying? You kind of realize that, black women are ultimate of the half. Like it's like just the other half of what you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, and just everything else. It's just even like the social connections we have, just the way black women look. You know what I mean? Like they really compliment us. You know what I mean? If you really think about it, like, just the essence of black women, the way like, there's a certain energy that they give off, you know what I mean, that you're not going to get from nobody else. Like nothing is like a black woman, like period. You know what I mean? So, whatever issues that I have went through, it's just never going to really affect it to the point where I'm like, oh, no black woman, that's ridiculous. And to me, you know what I mean? Because, you may have some bad experiences, but ultimately your best experiences is going to be what, the other half of yourself. It's the female half of us. You know what I mean? So, yeah, just all that, just like the social and then the dynamic and the, just black women just look. It's the epitome of beauty. You know what I mean? And so that's pretty much my aspect on it.
Okay.
For me personally, it had a lot to do with a couple of things. For one, what he said, loving yourself. Just put yourself in a position where you're in a relationship with somebody else. They can never fully relate to everything that you deal with.
Okay.
You know what I mean? When you go out there and let's use the typical, the police pulls you over. or they can't feel the same way you feel because these things are not common with them. You understand? Like so there was that aspect, and then I have people in my family that are mixed, and there's always this identity crisis thing going on. They don't know exactly where they fit or where they belong, and like for instance, I have cousins that are half Mexican, half black, and they're darker. So their Mexican family is looking at them like you're only black. So they have to deal with all of these different things. I never wanted to raise my children with these type of issues on top of the issues that we already deal with.
Right.
So there's that aspect, and then to be honest with you, I'm with him on the black women are the epitome of they are what beauty is to me. So
all right. Well, that's.
Now, the 3 men in the video said that they prefer black women because they love their black mothers, black women are the most beautiful, and black women represent the other half and understand their struggles as black men. Furthermore, these men don't want biracial children because they said that they want children that look like them and they don't want to risk children with identity issues. Finally, the men said they prefer to build a family that represents their black heritage. These men, in my opinion, epitomizes the attitudes of most quality black men, but it still doesn't negate the fact that there's a significant portion that beg to differ. And most of these men hate blackness for one reason or another, or they simply don't have access to black women. Now, self-hating black men have internalized the animosity that has been expressed by whites since the colonial era, when it was common for them to be viewed as part human. The negative ideals of black women were transferred from the slave master to the slaves, and now their descendants carry on those same horrific principles. Black women are cemented as defiled undesirables, undeserving of provisions and protection from black men that couldn't offer them anyways. After interracial relationships became legal, black men sought after the opportunity to become men and have status by acquiring white women. Others became men once white women said they were by acknowledging their existence, finally rendering them visible. The black men that allow their individual poor experiences with black women to push them into the arms of whiteness are insecure, weak, and lack racial pride. Regardless of their personal experiences, it should be recognized that their poor choice of black women is not indicative of the black female group collectively. Undesirable black men should evaluate themselves to understand what makes them unattractive. There are life coaches that teach men how to build their confidence and change their views to attract their preferred black woman. Using black women as a scapegoat to justify their rampant failures will not change the black man's position as prisoner of war. Furthermore, maintaining the delusion of freedom by having a white woman also won't change it. If black men want respect from the black female collective, they must stand up and free them from enslavement. Because see, look, slavery is still ongoing, but it's been modified and reshaped for modern society. This is why black people only represent 13.7% of the US population, but make up over 40% of the inmate citizenship. Moreover, modern slavery also explains why the masses of black people live in slums or obtain substandard slave education, contract the most diseases, experience the highest infant mortality rate, and etc. Black people are the forgotten ones in society, and black men are the targets for destruction, and black women and children are the most vulnerable. Nevertheless, until black men recognize how being subjugated for centuries has conquered their souls and misdirected their loyalties to their colonizers, they will always be mentally stunted, experience rampant failure, and possess false priorities. Understanding the historic atrocities of slavery and its psychological impact on the black man's subconscious would allow them to gain confidence, racial pride, and recognize that their blackness represents strength that's meant solely to build the black family structure. Okay, guys, so go ahead and leave some comments below. Do you agree with my commentary? Why do you believe so many black men prefer non-black women? Do you think that their lust for non-black women is a psychological issue? Or do you even care? Why do you think so many men that talk black actually lay white? Leave some comments below. I really want to know your thoughts on this. Also, if you have any topics that you'd like for me to cover, please send them to blackhistorystudent@gmail.com. This email is listed in the description section below. If you're interested in reading any of the books that I've referenced in this commentary, I've listed them in the description section below. And if you decide to purchase them, please do so using my affiliate links because I do receive a little commission for each sale, and you will be supporting the channel by doing so. If you'd like to read the article on this topic, please click on the link in the description section or visit blackhistorystudent.com. Finally, if you haven't done so already, like the video. If you're new, subscribe to the channel, and if you love the video, share it. Until next time, bye study group!